Thanks, RJ. Good morning, everybody. How are you all? So just a couple of quick thank yous. I want to thank Ann and Miss Megan for all their help getting me up here and getting me ready for this. I want to thank each and every one of you guys in the audience and welcome everybody from Denver Startup Week. Give yourselves a big round of applause. I appreciate you all spending your time with me this morning. And lastly, I want to thank RJ, Sydney, and Heidi from Creative Mornings, as well as all the other Creative Mornings folk here that put this on every month and make this event possible. Give them a round of applause, too. So, like RJ said, my name is Mikey Goldenberg, and I identify as a producer. I graduated from CU Boulder in 2002, and for pretty much the last 16 years, I've been working in radio. I got into radio in the late 90s at a station here locally, KBCO, and pretty much I've worked in all facets of radio, coast to coast, in programming, production, promotions, sales, marketing, on-air, voiceover, overnights, you name it, I've done it. I got back to town about 10 years ago where I became the executive producer and morning show co-host for a station here in town called Alice 1059, and about 4 years ago, I started as the general manager of KBCU Radio 1190 up in Boulder and down here in Denver. So we're a small 10,000 watt AM signal. Some of you may have heard of us, OBR AM, so many of you may have not. We do have an app that streams in stereo, so you can check us out there as well. What else? I'm also the co-owner of Ghost Pixel Visuals. We are not a time travel company. We're a 4D projection mapping company. You might have seen some of our work on some of the buildings around town or at Red Rocks. And I am also an instructor of audio production and digital sound editing at CU's new college, the College of Media, Communication, and Information, and a yoga teacher just across the railroad tracks behind me at a studio in Rhino. So I tell all of you this because it'll come up in just a few minutes, so bear with me. Lastly, however, I do want to mention something, shameless plug. I sit on the board of this nonprofit called College Radio Day, and it just so happens that today is College Radio Day. And OBR is a national organization simply promoting college radio, coming up for students, and then local and national acts that are on that level. So, collegeradioday.org, if anybody's interested in that, please come and see me afterwards. So getting on with it. My caveat today is that I'm not here to stand on a soapbox, I'm not here to preach, and I certainly don't have all the answers to all of the questions. But what I do have is a story. I have an experience and a message of empowerment to give to you, based on what I've been going through and the journey that I've been taking, a journey that's actually still going on as we speak today. But before we get there, I want to tell you about Monty. Now, who's Monty? That's Monty. Raise your hand if you're a dog lover. All right, cool, we can connect, right? So Monty is my 1.5-year-old German short-haired pointer. And if you know the breed, you know that they are a handful at very best. If you don't, I'll start by telling you that Monty's what's called a gun dog, or a bird dog. And as such, he comes pre-programmed with the following 3 traits. Treats, birds, and whatever is always in my other hand. And again, if you know the breed, they are extremely stubborn and strong-willed. And once they get focused on one of these values, being treats, birds, or what's in my other hand, it's extremely difficult to break that focus without some sort of training. And in Monty's case, after a significant amount of time in obedience training, that came to this. This is a shock collar, and it does exactly that. It shocks the dog at the neck with varying levels of intensity. And believe you me, I've had this on each and every one of my limbs, and I've even had it around my neck at 10 times the amount I'd ever even think of putting on my dog. It's pretty much like an energized static electricity shock when you take your laundry out of the dryer. And it sounds mean, but it's really not. But here's something about this shock collar that many people don't know and don't take the time to learn. It doesn't just shock. There are 3 levels. The first being a sound. The second, and take my word for it, is a gentle vibrate. And the third is a shock, like I just mentioned. And I've defined the shock collar as follows, just to kind of define its usage and its relevance to the theme here today. The purpose of the shock collar is to mitigate distraction, call attention to a request, communicate on multiple levels with a gradual build in urgency, open a one-track mind. In short, this is a training tool used on my dog to get him to learn, grow, and be good as a happy and healthy dog. And I can report that using this, it's actually worked. But would you all be surprised to know that I don't use the shock function any longer? And I agree with what some of you are thinking, that it is me. And that if I were to use that shock function, Monty would be too overwhelmed to go scurrying into the corner and hide. It didn't accomplish my goal to train, nor his to learn. And it mitigated any sort of learning curve I was trying to institute in our training regimen. Basically, it didn't work in this way. Instead, what I did was I learned. I educated myself on how the shock collar sound and shape functionality is used, along with verbal gestures, hand cues, and other training mechanisms, to slowly teach what we both needed to know in this doggy-owner relationship. When we needed to make a change in Monty's behavior, we didn't go full force, and we didn't do nothing. Instead, we used this distorted spectrum up here that accompanied this method from a sound to a shape. And we used that collar to effectively train him away from the things that may or may not have been of the best interest in him, the things that were more important to him. Now, what if I equated those 3 traits to us, as creative individuals and adults for that matter? We're going to start with treats. These are simple pleasures, our happiness. I like backpacks and stickers. I love to snowboard, I love camping, I love my new truck that I just bought. There are those little things in our lives that make us us. Birds. That's our profession or what we do. We're often told to focus on that, the job. And anything outside of that is a distraction. So if we came up through the ranks predetermined to do one thing, we're probably not going to look outside of that very often, are we? And then what's in my other hand? The cupcake toy. I call this keeping up with the Joneses. This is your ego. It's what tells us that something appears better because it's in someone else's hands or that you don't have it. Our ego tells us that what we've accomplished, are accomplishing, and want to accomplish aren't good enough because there's something better in someone else's hand. Does that sound familiar? Now let me pull this around into a little personal context. About the same time that I got Monty, I was going through an existential professional crisis. I've also come to realize that many others have gone through that or are currently experiencing it. The thing was, with all those jobs, all those titles, all those accolades, and all those products produced, I was in a rut, a professional rut, and I did not know what to do. I felt stuck, and believe me, this didn't happen overnight. It took a lot of time for all of this to pile up on my shoulders. And after it did, I began to feel crushed. My creativity dwindled, my passions were being ignored, and I was retreating into this introverted person that I didn't know, and that wasn't me. I was alone, tired, and extremely frustrated, and I was feeling those impacts on a daily basis. It was in a situation like this that I knew I needed a change, and there came a breaking point where I turned, and I decided to put on my own shock collar. I started to deal with this concept, a visual concept where I'd come up on this group of trees, heavily wooded area, and I had 3 choices. The first choice was to turn tail and walk away because it was too many trees to get through. Why mess with it? The second was to pick through the trees, catching yourself on every branch, every root, and getting lost at every wrong turn. And the third was to go around the trees. And now I'm not a quitter, and I have no patience for being lost in the woods, so I decided to take Route 3 and go around the trees. What this did, it got me started to think about how scenarios present themselves, how problems present themselves, and how to get the wheels greased to deal with them and to go around them. So what was my shot collar? Well, it started as a sound, so to speak, when I asked my big brother for advice. And like big brothers are known to do, he pointed me down the path that I'm on today. This, my brother, was my sound from my shot collar. It was something small and gentle that got me motivated. What it did for Monty, it did for me. Helped to mitigate distraction, call attention to a request, communicate on multiple levels with an increasing urgency, and open a one-track mind. Without this slow build, all of this would have been too much. It would have been overwhelming, and you never would have started. I never would have started. To shock yourself, to shock myself by quitting my job, running off to Fiji, finding that bandage, running resume in hand to the back of the line and saying, "Look at me." That wouldn't help my problems, right? As I found out that that was not the path that I needed to take. And like many of us know, it would not have given me the ability to find what it was that I was looking for. So this is where my shake begins. I decided that I needed to step away, reevaluate, mitigate distraction, leverage my experiences, focus on the positives, and build my confidence back up. And the two things that I needed most to do that were time and personal empowerment. For too long, I felt entitled that what I had accomplished was going to bring me something that I deserved, that I was owed something for what I had done. I'd worked myself into repeating this phrase, "I don't know what I want, but I don't want this." That was the first greatest mistake, and getting over that, taking charge of that sentiment, was the first great stepping stone to getting on with things. Now instead, I was taking action, setting small goals, opening up to new ideas, building relationships and networking like we're all doing here at Creative Mornings and Denver Startup Group. It also directly helped me create my personal mantra. Do something, not something else. Once I stopped wanting to do something and just started, once I wanted to stop doing something else and started just doing something, my eyes and ears opened up to where I could find that. I was participating in and completing personal homework assignments that kept me accountable and increased my level of personal understanding. I worked with a career coach to organize my personal life, who helped me deal with my communication issues and find like-minded individuals to share concepts and ideas with. And I started to dive back into old projects, old companies, things that I had long ignored, started to enjoy the minutiae, the day-to-day, and the benefits and successes that those actions got me. It was here too that I also developed 5 personal values and a purpose statement. Now you have to remember, this is a personal journey. This is just my story that I'm sharing with you. However, this is how I built something to funnel my frustrations to, something to come back to when I needed to refocus on what it was I was spending my life and my time doing. It led me to more confident understanding of who I am professionally, what I have to offer, what I've accomplished, and how I want to take all of that to grow, build, and share with other creatives. And now I'd like to share my values and purpose statement. And again, these are very personal. You should not expect to have these at the top of your head or walk out of here with some epiphany. It takes time, and it takes hard work and dedication. But that's okay, because it allows you to clear away that muck. It allows you to use that shake to find what's very important most important to you personally and professionally? So my values are balance, personal and professional. We all hear about the balance in work. Is the ping pong table worth your sanity outside of the job? How do you swim through both of those angles, your job and your life? Where do you find that middle ground? Contribution, feeling like the work I've done matters. Be it to an individual or to a project, is the end goal and the end product something that I can stand there and be proud of being part of. Spontaneity. Sometimes you gotta kick the dirt up and do little crazy things. Spontaneity is the ability to act on a whim or do things without fear or failure. So yes, while there is a tale of caution in all of this, please go out there and run amok. Self-awareness. This is when I stepped away and looked at myself from an outside perspective. I saw that this takes time. This is a process. I understood my expertise and where my skills lie, and I was humble in the journey. And relationships. While relationships is last on this list, it's first on my values, and it's where I really saw an opportunity to start to connect with people, to not only help the issues that I was dealing with, but to help them with maybe what I had to bring to the table. It's aligning with like-minded creatives, producers, and professionals with a departure from what can you do for me to what can we do together kind of attitude. And my purpose, to inspire adventurous spirit. I have two examples I want to share. One that worked, and the other that didn't work, but kind of did, and in the end it didn't, and then it did. Bear with me, I'll get to that. I don't have a definition of what inspiring adventurous spirit is, and I don't think that it needs one yet, at least for me. And I use that statement both on myself and with others that I encounter. And with that I find that I want to give much more than I want to receive. The first example, shortly after I started this journey, I was high on cloud nine about being outside. I loved the outdoors, travel, adventure. There was so much that wasn't my job. It was precluding me even more from dealing with the rut that I was in. I let it get worse by ignoring it and bandaging it with things. However, that led me to look in a different direction towards a different industry. That industry being the adventure travel world. A far cry from being a non-commercial radio GM in Golden. You see Instagram, Facebook, blogs, and articles about the simple life on the road, and man, I wanted that simple life. I wanted to escape the confusion, the solitude, the commute. So I dove into it. That was the place for me. I talked to friends and colleagues and started looking at the world of travel, which eventually led me to a phone call with the, quote, father of adventure travel, a gentleman who had been around the block in this world. His name was Richard. And Richard didn't know me, never talked to me, but the person that introduced us knew both of us well. And that led a weeks-long email, phone, and I even sent him a postcard from a gas station in Montana kind of conversation, where he told me about the adventure travel world. We talked about the freedom to move, the people that you could meet, the places you go, and the experiences you have. It sounded amazing. I loved it. I met with more people heavily involved in the industry. I even went so far as to gain sponsorship for a road trip that I took last summer and set up a meeting with a publisher of a local magazine to pitch him an editorial concept about adventure and life on the road. But guess what? It wasn't for me. I just thought it was. I took those meetings and made those calls, and I poured pen to paper to try to find a bandage for what was ailing me. And even with all the amazingness that I found in that world, it wasn't for me. Finding that out, however, was invaluable in this process, because it taught me that something that I was doing didn't have to be a home run or the fix to all of my issues. It taught me that the process is sometimes more important than the result. My second example. This is somewhat of another sound from my brother. It started with a casual phone call and 5 words. I think it's 5 words. I'll have to ask you guys. He said, Mikey, what about startup culture? I don't know if startup's one word or two. What about startup culture? And I thought, what about it? What do I know about the startup culture? How I'm a radio guy, sanded and stuck in a basement studio with no outlet and nothing in front of me. What would I want from them? What would they be able to give to me? It's a scary thought to throw yourself in, but I did, and it worked. It worked because of how I was building and what I was doing to grow. I had really lost sight at that point of what can you do for me, and started to want to contribute, to participate, to find these values in other avenues. I no longer wanted to run resume in hand to the back of the line. If we're selling apples and you're selling oranges, I wanted to bring my apples to the orange table, because you never know what the conversation is going to be or what might come out of that. It was through all of this that I became one thing, aware. Before, things always looked like they were going the wrong way, that I didn't have control. But after going through this process and learning this personal journey, I now have the tools in the tool belt and the ability to use each and every one of them to accomplish the things I wanted to accomplish and gain the goals that I was seeking. Now, in the spectrum of this sound to shock example, my goal is to never not shock myself. Again, take the tale of caution here with a grain of salt. It's a good rule of thumb for me to stay away from looking like this guy. And while I'm not saying you should never take risks or experiences, having this kind of aspect to come back to gives you control. Gives you the opportunity and the ability to use your values and your purpose, to make decisions without fear or rash judgment. You have the skills, you have the tools, you have the values and purpose. And now the spectrum from sound to shock to use when you need to go through things in your own life. So I'm happy to say that Monty is a success story. And I'm a proud dad. But we still work on it day in, day out, week to week, month to month. It was a pain in the ass this morning. But like Monty, he can't always use the shock collar. We can't always use the shock collar. And for that matter, we should not. It's only when it's a needed reminder to come back to the things that we've been talking about. Don't forget, each and every one of us in here is human. We may falter, we may become distracted, unengaged, but it's how you handle that. Use what you've learned, how you put things together to come out better on the other side. And again, for me, this is an ongoing process for both myself and my learning curve, and for Monty in his training. But I can always reach back to that shock collar when I need something to rely on, something that makes sense, something to filter. So to conclude, for those of you silently nodding your head in the room, saying, I'm working on this, I'm doing these things, I want to commend you. I want to congratulate you because it's hard work, and you should keep doing it. For those that want to spark the match and light the fire, I commend you as well. However, just as my brother did, I want to stand here and act as a sound, as loud or as quiet as you might need to get you motivated and to get you empowered. So, here's some homework. One of the tools that I used to start to become accountable to myself in the very beginning was homework. This isn't from a book, this isn't from a website. These are things that I thought that I would share as a platform for where you might want to jump off if this is something that you're questioning in your head. Things not making sense. What we can do is start to do something, not something else. You can choose to do each and every one of these, or none at all. Find someone to be accountable to. Make a networking friend here in this room this morning. But getting the ball rolling, greasing the wheels, not shying away from adverse conditions or those trees, you can go a long way. Thanks.